When I was younger, my family and I went on a road trip to Wyoming to see Yellowstone National Park. It's a beautiful place, and if you haven't seen it yet, I recommend it. Anyways, so from our home in California, it was about a 17-hour drive in our Yukon XL. It took us several days worth of on and off driving to get there, and during the nights, we would try to find a little motel to rest at. One of the nights, due to us being behind schedule, my dad attempted to drive through the night to get us there sooner. He made it probably into the wee hours of the night before he deemed it unsafe and parked us in this little unlit rest stop in the middle of the woods in some flyover state. My brothers and I had fallen asleep in the car several hours before he'd stopped. So for at least a couple hours, we were all sleeping in the car in this dark little parking lot surrounded by forest. Having got a couple hours of sleep and being in a pretty uncomfortable position, I woke up in the middle of the night. Pretty disoriented, but not really scared. I looked around and saw everyone fast asleep in this pitch-black car, and naturally I felt pretty alone. I tried to fall back asleep, but it just wasn't working out. So I just sat there for a while, boredom setting in. Looking out the window to see where we were, it was pitch black, so I couldn't see Jack's asterisk T. Luckily, I wasn't the type to pack light, and had brought a couple flashlights in my bag. Being careful not to disturb my sleeping family, I reached into the back seat, unzipped my bag, and pulled out a little plastic, yellow flashlight. It wasn't the brightest, but it was enough to see the foreground of the general surroundings. I put it up to the glass, making sure not to make any noise, and pushed the little switch into the on position. I pressed my face against the glass and looked out. At first, it looked like a normal tree line with some bushes, trees, whatever. But as I scanned the darkness, looking for animals, buildings, etc., I noticed this dark shape standing between these two trees in the distance. It looked like the shape of a man, but it wasn't moving, just sitting there. After watching it for a good while and seeing no real signs of movement, I just assumed it was a bush or some kind of natural occurrence. Just as I was about to turn the light off and reattempt sleep, I saw this shadow shape turn 90 degrees and move behind a tree, disappearing from sight. This scared the asterisk T out of me, and I immediately turned off the flashlight and threw my sweater-turned blanket over my head, shut my eyes tightly, and covered my ears. I was paralyzed with fear, and too full of adrenaline to get any sleep, sat in this semi-fetal position, clutching my flashlight for the rest of the night. I waited until the sun came up, and we were back on the road before I got any sleep. I didn't tell anybody about the man I saw in the woods. We were leaving a wedding we had attended that was held about 3 hours from home. My boyfriend had stayed sober in order to drive us home. I was pretty drunk. As we were driving the dark country back roads to get back to the city, I was half dozing. I remember squinting because there seemed to be bright headlights washing over us, and then my boyfriend, who was driving, started screaming, like full-on screaming like I've never heard him do before or since. It wasn't a loud, high-pitched screaming, but a deep-in-the-throat screaming that broke in and out and that left him hoarse. He swerved our car sharply to the side of the road, nearly into a ditch. I was now fully awake and said, "What, are you okay?" He said that he saw a truck coming full bore towards us in the dark and honestly thought we were going to die. I looked behind us, a long, straight road with no houses or streetlights. There was no sign of a truck or any kind of vehicle, no rear headlights on the road or any light from a truck's headlights, which we would have seen, and no sound of truck or car or anything. But he was shaking, and I initially brushed it off as him maybe falling asleep at the wheel, which is already scary in and of itself. We were on a narrow country road. There was no way a massive truck could have gone by us without hitting our car, and I don't remember feeling the rumble and vibrating of our car, which was an old POS that would have happened if a truck had narrowly missed us. So I dismissed it. He still swears that he saw a massive truck coming towards us. However, I do remember a flood of headlights hurting my half-closed eyes just before my boyfriend freaked out. Many years ago, a friend and I decided to visit our mutual friend at her university and spend the weekend with her. We had extremely detailed directions to follow, and we were told the trip should take about 3 hours. While nothing went wrong on our drive, it seemed to take forever. I don't remember exactly at what point the woods started, but I do remember traveling through these woods for a long time, perhaps an hour. We were already well past the 3-hour time frame my friend had given us by the time we left the woods. When we finally reached my friend's college town, it was nearly 4.5 hours since we'd left. We didn't get lost. We never hit traffic or stopped for more than a few minutes. But we quickly forgot about it since we were happy to spend the weekend with our friend. When the trip back was a little over 3 hours, we thought it was weird, but didn't think much of it at the time. It wasn't until my next trip to visit that I realized something had been strange. I spent that whole next trip waiting for the long path through the woods that we had been on the first time, but it never appeared, following the same directions as the first time. The entire trip took me about 3 hours, as did every other trip I made out there in the following years. I don't know what happened, and I've never been able to replicate it. I still wonder what happened and where we really were when passing through those woods. This story is from my grandpa. He's a retired long-distance truck driver, and he often drove throughout the night and early hours of the morning over unfamiliar roads. This one particular day, when my grandpa was in his 30s, it was between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., and he was driving down a twisting country road that was so narrow, only one vehicle could fit at a time. If 2 vehicles met from different directions, one would have to pull off the road to let the other pass. The road was empty save for my grandpa. On the right side of the road there was thick woodland, and on the left, open fields and a lake. There were no streetlights. The only light came from my grandpa's truck and the moon. It was pretty lonely. My granddad was going steadily down the road and going a bit faster than he should have. When my grandpa said this, I always took it to mean he was blazing down the road as fast as the truck could go. He was listening to the radio and probably not paying much attention when he suddenly felt hands on his shoulders and a voice whisper his name in his ear, so close that he felt the breath on his skin. He recognized the voice. It belonged to his mother, who had passed away a few years previously. Naturally, this spooked my grandpa, and he instinctively hit the brakes. Seconds later, his headlights lit up a pile of 3 crashed cars that took up the entire road. My grandpa stopped just short of the wreckage. If he hadn't braked when he did, he would have plowed straight into the cars. The occupants in the crashed cars were all severely injured, and my grandpa was able to get emergency help. Had he joined the pileup, it probably would have meant a more dire outcome for all of them. There's a number of explanations for what my grandpa heard and felt, but my grandpa truly believes it was his mother giving him a warning. In Delano, California, residents may warn you to stay away from Browning Road. As the legend goes, a young woman died on the road many years ago when she crossed the street and was struck by a car. On the road is a memorial that many believe is in tribute to the woman. People say she now haunts that fateful spot. Sometimes, she merely appears on the side of the road as if contemplating if she should cross. Other times, however, she is said to materialize in the back seat of a passerby's car, throttling them from behind until they crash. Or she might leap in front of your car, causing you to swerve erratically. Others say she has the power to crawl beneath your car, and remove pieces until you can't drive anymore, while still others claim that those who seek to communicate with her disappear, only to turn up days later, screaming about unknown horrors.